Track symptom screenings and temperature checks by having individuals self-certify that they're free of symptoms before entering the school buildings, and require an increase in school-wide cleaning and disinfection. Finally, I'd like to talk about the feedback that we got from the staff and from the public. In the spring, we asked families and staff what they preferred as learning models. Now, we did this understanding that we had not gotten the ISB guidance yet. We didn't know what the rules were going to be. So we just kind of used our imaginations and said, all in person, all at home, or some type of combination of the two. And you'll see that among families, now this is in June, this is the Illinois' numbers are different, ISB's guidance hasn't come out yet. You'll see that about 17% wanted to stay 100% remote. 35% preferred some type of hybrid model. And at the time, about 48% wanted 100% on-campus learning. Now, if you look at the staff version, that's roughly the same time. It was in June. And we offered them the same 3 choices, and then we also offered a 4th choice, which was any of the above. You'll see that 17%, same as the parents, asked for remote learning only. 25% asked for some type of hybrid. 30% asked for full-time on-campus. And about a quarter said, we'll do whatever you want. But we trust you, come up with a good plan, and we'll do it. So you can see why writing a plan is really challenging, right? So a quarter of you are going to be dissatisfied no matter what we do. It's really hard in a place like 146 where we usually beat our heads against the wall until, if we can't get to anonymity, unanimity, we at least have consensus. It's going to be challenging to do something that is going to be disappointing to a big number of people. And then we redid a survey in July. This was a different survey. And we feared that this would be misinterpreted, and to an extent it was. Some people thought that we were saying it's going to be one or the other, which we want. And it was 100% in person or 100% remote. What we were trying to get to the bottom of is if it were 100% in person, all day, every day, or 100% remote, which would you choose? The reason why we asked that question is because we theorized that if enough people prefer 100% remote, our population would be low enough where we could give everybody who wants 100% in person what they want. That was kind of our last ditch effort to give everybody what they want. I really thought that if we could do all in or all out, we would make the most people happy. But of course, if you look back at our surveys in June, I was wrong about that, because there's a good number of people that want some type of hybrid, want a bit, they want a taste of in school. They know that that's important, but they're not comfortable sending their kids all day, every day with a full group of other kids. So challenging. This was helpful to us. The survey that we sent in July, if it had come back 50-50, I think that we really could have offered people who wanted all day, every day in school, exactly that. Because enough people were choosing staying home, that our school populations would be low enough that we could do that. Interesting stuff. So we poured over all of this, as well as all the data we could find from every credible source we could. And we got these folks together for more hours than they would have liked. We poured over every detail of everything, and disagreed often and frequently, and then landed on something that I think is at least worthy to bring before the board in front of a crowd and sign our names to it. So with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Wendy Wogan, who's going to take us through the instruction part.
Thanks, Jeff. I won't get too close, I'm shouting now. We, like Jeff just outlined, we had some good data to take a look at. We know it was preliminary, but we did use that data to help guide some of our decision making and to derive some proposed instructional models to support student learning. And what evolved from that is after we looked at a hybrid model of a 50-50, we kind of called it a split week, and 100% remote learning, but enhanced, to offer our families as a choice. A couple caveats with that is that we wanted to make sure families would have choice to transition models at the end of the semester, and that students from the same family would be on the same schedule for our hybrid model. So what does this hybrid model look like? Let's take a look at it. This hybrid split week is where students will attend school in person 2 days a week and engage in remote learning from home 3 days a week. As we started to have our discussions, however, we were thinking about, we want to make sure we have the building capacity, the classroom capacity, the staffing available, and then most importantly, keep in mind that our students were going to be safe and healthy. And that then led us down the path to create 2 versions to ensure that we could support this hybrid model. If so many parents want to come back live, we want to make sure, as Jeff mentioned, that was something we all want. So we created 2 versions to support a couple scenarios if we have too many, or if we have too many families selected that would choose to come back in person and live. So here's a look at what those look like. We have a version 1, and for families and students who would be interested in version 1, we would have a group A and a group B of teachers and students that would follow the following schedule. We have a Tuesday, Thursday remote learning, and Wednesday, Friday in-person learning, live at school. And on Mondays, all students would be in remote learning. We also have a group B then, that's kind of fun. We have a Tuesday, Thursday in-person live at school learning, Wednesday, Friday remote learning, and again, same as for today, all students in remote learning. With this version 1, we felt it was significant that our students would be able to follow their assigned teacher if they're in elementary, or a teacher team if they're in CMS, for both in-person and remote learning. CMS did some reviews and they felt very confident that they could follow this version 1. So then we shifted and looked at version 2. And really version 2 follows the same schedule as version 1. But we would have students with their homeroom teacher for in-person instruction and Monday remote learning. We would then separate for the other 2 remote days, students would be with a separate teacher to support the remote learning on these days. This version came about to make sure that we could meet the safety and health guidelines. If, again, more families, too many families really desired that in-person learning. So those were the 2 versions that evolved. A little more about those 2 versions. What's instruction look like? How are my students going to be learning? In hybrid version 1, on Mondays, remote learning would look like a combination of direct instruction and independent learning. It would also be for those 2 days, they would be an in-person instruction. That would look like facilitated by a teacher and or a team of teachers to support our state learning standards and our district curriculum, and a combination of some small group and large group instruction. As far as the remote learning 2 days, they would receive direct instruction and independent learning 2 days a week that builds on in-person learning following state learning standards and district curriculum maps. Our hybrid 2 version is very similar. Monday is the same, remote learning, combination of direct instruction and independent learning. We'll have the in-person instruction for the 2 days. It's facilitated by the teacher, providing some small group and large group instruction. But our remote learning will look a little different. We'll have on the 2 remote learning days, it's not a Monday, they'll have independent learning with teacher check-in and support 2 days a week that builds on the in-person learning following state learning standards and district curriculum. And again, the hybrid 2 allowed us to accommodate more in-person learning by shifting the remote learning of the 2 days to a little bit different instructional type. Just a little more about our hybrid version 1 and 2. We'll do a little comparisons. For our schools in version 1, CMS and elementary, staffing would be a team of teachers at CMS and homeroom teacher for elementary, and that goes back to talking about how the students will follow that same teacher throughout the week for both in-person learning and remote learning. We approximate, I use the word approximate very carefully, in-person class sizes, CMS could go up to 22 in a classroom for in-person live instruction, and our elementary schools could go up to approximately 16 for in-person live instruction. And for remote, that would, again, these are approximate, CMS up to about 30 and elementary up to about 25 to 30. If we shift over to version 2, and again, I want to really reiterate, CMS has looked at all of their building capacity, classroom capacity, scheduling, and they're very firm on their version 1. They're following version 1. So version 2 really applies to elementary only. And so what would that look like? Our homeroom teachers would be with those students that are in their homeroom for in-person instruction on Mondays. But a remote teacher would have to support the remote learning days, a separate remote teacher. So again, what does those approximate in-person class sizes look like? Elementary, approximately 8 to 12. For in-person and elementary up to 35 to 45 for remote learning. We also did a lot of considerations based on these 2 hybrid versions. I just want to share a few. You can kind of see if you go hybrid 1 bullet point to hybrid 2, they really are more comparison and considerations as well. So in hybrid 1, we have large class, possibly larger class sizes, but still physically distance our students appropriately. In hybrid 2, we're able to get a little smaller class sizes that allow for greater distancing and reinforcement of our health guidelines. In hybrid 1, going to our second bullet, we may have to do some reallocation of staff to different positions, and it might be more likely that in hybrid 2, there's a less need for that. Potentially, we may have to increase certified staff in hybrid 1. But on the other hand, learning is going to be a little more disruptive for our students working with more than one staff member to support their core instruction. In hybrid 1, we also know that learning can be more continuous and cohesive because they're going to be using the same teacher for both remote and in-person. The other consideration of hybrid 1 was we like the idea of increasing student-teacher family connections. We thought that might be a little more difficult in hybrid 2, having multiple teachers. And we also know that we're going to need more team and collaborative planning required to support continuous learning in our hybrid 2, version 2. And finally, we felt more consistent class sizes would be in our hybrid 1, where, as you saw in that last slide, some of our remote learning classes could be a little greater and vary a little bit more. And we just feel like a hybrid 1 version allows us to familiarize staff and train staff and have everybody ready to transition to remote learning if needed at some point during the course of the year. A couple of things I want to mention is an option we said 100% remote learning. We also said it's enhanced. So we put down some enhancements and considerations as we've been planning and discussing. We know that we're going to be writing a remote learning plan with staff and administrators. And we want to follow some of these key guidelines that ISB outlined and also information we gathered from our parent and staff surveys in the spring about our remote learning. So we know as Dr. Staver said, that we're definitely having 5 hours of instruction. And we know that we'll have learning, we'll have some outside office hours to also support that independent work and home. We also are looking to make sure we have a combination of direct instruction and independent learning with smaller breakout sessions in Zoom. We've streamlined our learning platforms to include just Seesaw and Schoology. We're looking to make sure we have a balance of direct instruction using tangible materials, and what I mean by that is if you're doing 100% remote learning, can we provide those students some manipulative packages, some materials that we would see in the classroom that would have available at home, and balance that with some digital instruction using online resources. We know we're going to follow our D146 grading practices, traditional grading and standard-based grading. Definitely going to be looking at ways we can have more differentiation to meet student needs. Regular attendance will be taken daily. Some considerations though with the 100% remote learning model is that D146 students may be assigned to a remote learning classroom in their grade level from across the district. And what that means is maybe you have a third grader third student and a third grader focus student, and they may comprise a remote learning classroom with a remote learning teacher assigned to the classroom. We also know we have to consider going forward some dates for material pickups. As I mentioned, we really want to put tangible materials into our students' hands for the remote learning. This I won't get into too much detail, but part of enhancing remote learning is to look at a way to also mirror our in-person learning. And so this is just a very sample, and I want to stress sample, K5 schedule, that kind of gives you a flavor of how we would like to have discussions around mirroring the instruction and the amount of instruction time provided to our students for both in-person scheduling and remote scheduling. And as you can see, we looked at our math and ELAs 90-minute with whole group direct instruction and small groups as well in our remote schedule. We want to see, 90 minutes of math with whole group direct instruction and small group breakout groups. There were some other instructional and program considerations that we worked through as the instructional committee. We felt it was very important to make sure overall students in high priority categories, such as our special education and our ELL students, may be offered additional in-person instruction based on individual student need. We also considered if we have to move back to phase 3, that we would have to transition students to remote learning except for high priority students. District 146, we will be using their assessments to help guide our planning and identify our learning loss. Part of our thinking with this, we wanted to make it known to our remote learners that are 100% that they could make appointments to come in and also be administered certain assessments. And knowing, I know Dr. Stewart said the amount of training and professional development that we want to offer our staff, our parents, our students, we've suggested that we go and look at a calendar adjustment and add one remote professional development day for August 25th and move the first day of school for students to Wednesday, August 26th. This will allow us to still have those 3 days we typically have. That's Tuesday and sick day at the beginning of the year with an additional remote day for additional training and support for our teachers. And we also suggested that we move our sick days, which are on Friday, I have them on Friday, to Mondays. And the reason for that is we want to capitalize and maximize the amount of in-person instruction for our students. And we felt if Mondays are all remote learning days for both models, if you're in the hybrid or if you're in remote learning, that we would minimize the loss of that in-person because we wouldn't be off due to sick days or holidays. We're definitely planning to put students and parents, provide training for students and parents with our Seesaw and Schoology learning platforms. And certainly we're going to be looking when school opens up to provide that training for our little ones and our older big ones for physical distancing and protocols and health and safety expectations. Another consideration that we came across, and there's been a great deal of discussion on this one, is elementary accelerated math program model may have to change a bit. It may be more of a cushion model, or depending on where the model goes and the numbers, we may have to eliminate that based on potential increase in staffing. At this time, CMS is not going to offer accelerated math except the Math 1 honors. Now, with that being said, that doesn't mean we're just going to close the door and say that's the way it is. We're certainly looking at options to still support our accelerated math students. Possibly looking at some remote after, like virtual accelerated math clubs after school to offer to keep our kids on track and on the path that they're on. And finally, with all the guidelines, we determine and suggest that our open houses, our curriculum night, and our parent-teacher conferences will be virtual. However, we felt with the little kindergartners coming in how important that was to get acclimated and meet your teacher. So we're going to look at doing a kindergarten meet and greet in person, where our buildings can come up with those schedules and also accommodate families who feel like they just need an individual appointment. So those were some of our considerations and going forward. And that brings us to school environment practices and protocols.
Thank you, Wendy. It is on. Great. So just to kind of piggyback off of what you've heard from Dr. Staywick and from Wendy, we really did look at a variety of resources and documents. And when we broke off into our subcommittee for school health and wellness, at first I thought, oh, this is going to be pretty easy because these are guidelines and requirements and basically them telling us what we must do. But it actually ended up being a lot more challenging than we had anticipated because, again, as Dr. Staywick had mentioned, we all had a great deal of difference in opinion on how these guidelines would be set in school. So the way that we formatted this presentation in our draft transition plan is really to try to explain the school environment and how those guidelines fit into the school day. Because that is what we know that our parents are most familiar with, our students and our teachers. So all of these health guidance and guidance documents that we reviewed, we really set them into different classroom and school environments throughout the day. So we're going to start just by looking at building entry, and it seems like, you know, this would be an area that would be pretty cut and dry because they told us that everyone must do self-certification or symptom checker daily. Our team is recommending that we do have self-certification daily using a symptom checker that I have to say our school, our district nurse, Mary Huntley, was crucial in assisting with this plan. She did a lot of research over the summer on what we should be using, what should be included in our symptom checker, what our classrooms should look like. So I appreciate that she added a lot to this team, particularly in this area. So what that symptom checker means is it's many of the symptoms that you have seen when you're walking into buildings. We are going to be asking that all students and staff self-certify daily. What that looks like for staff is that they will be verifying daily what their symptoms. What that looks like for students is that we will be asking parents to monitor those at home, and they will be verifying those weekly. We are hoping to use some technology to do this. There are a lot of different companies that have jumped on this need, and we're hoping to utilize some type of app that would be available to students and families to complete that certification daily. But families will be getting the self-certification symptoms. They will be posted at our doors. That is something that we are requiring. We will also be requiring temperature checks on site for visitors. It will be up to the building as to how those are done, who is doing those temperature checks. However, we do feel that for visitors, that the temperature checks are necessary, and we'll also be asking them to self-certify with symptoms. Arrival and dismissal, we understand that those are often our most crowded times during the day at school. And this really, we had a lot of discussion about this regarding arrival and dismissal when it came to looking at our two different hybrid versions. What we do know is that during arrival and dismissal, we need to maintain physical distancing. The buildings will be looking at staggering arrival and dismissal times as well as adding staging areas. Information regarding arrival and dismissal is really going to be dependent upon how many students we have in person, and it's really going to be building dependent. So Once we are done with our transition plan and the board has finalized that plan, a lot of work will begin at the building level to kind of add the detail to this plan that will then be communicated to all of the families and students. So the next area would be hallway, restroom, and locker usage. There are going to be limits, there will be limits placed on the number of students allowed in the hallways and the restrooms at one time, and believe it or not, I learned something that there's even an app for that. So there's actually an app that we're looking at using that monitors what students the number of students that are in and out of hallways and restrooms. Of course, it doesn't tell you who, but it gives you a number of different students in different locations of the building. So we're actually looking at using that as well, particularly at CMS where we know our population is greater and there's not as much scheduling of those types of activities. We will have the option to utilize lockers. Again, this is going to be building specific. Our building lockers are set up very differently throughout the district. Those of you at Cruise and Fear know that you have locker rooms. Much more challenging to socially distance in a locker room versus at some of our other schools where the lockers are in the hallway. Much easier to stagger the use of those lockers during that time. But we weigh the pros and cons of using lockers. It's nice to use lockers where kids can put their personal items that are just theirs inside that locker. So we came down to the fact that we think that it's best to use lockers if we can stagger those times, but we didn't want to make a blanket statement that lockers will be used in all buildings because, again, the type of locker storage is so different across the district. Classrooms. This is obviously at the forefront of everyone's mind. What will our classrooms look like? We know that based upon the hybrid model that we choose or that's recommended for the elementary school, it will really determine how many bodies are in that class. We've had principals do some sampling of what the classroom will look like with a desk 3-foot distance. We know that in most of our elementary schools, if not all, we could fit comfortably without taking much out, 16 desks 3 feet apart from one another. We know if there's less students in that classroom, we could add some tables, we could add some other common areas where kids could be instructed in distance. So we do know we are very fortunate in our district that we do have wonderful facilities here and we have extremely roomy classrooms. So that I'm confident that we can maintain regardless of which version of hybrid would be chosen or recommended. In the classrooms, we are requiring that face masks are used for all students, unless outdoors, meeting or physically distanced at a 6-foot perimeter, which is per the CDC guidelines and per ISB guidance. And I think that's one area that ISB is really kind of taking a hard stance on is the use of face masks within the 6 feet. Schedules will be developed to limit the movement of students throughout the day. This goes back to hearing the guidance about ISB wanting us to have the teachers come more to the students versus the students going to different locations and different teachers. So the elementaries and the middle school are looking at different ways that can be maintained. Specialized instruction may take place, and when I talk about specialized instruction, these are students that may require special education services, students with English language services, students with tier services. Those might be required to be outside of that classroom. However, those groups would be either individualized or extremely small groups, and we would be recommending the use of extra PPE. The modified instructional plans to reduce student contact, reduce classroom sizes to maintain physical distancing, and a really big point of what you read in any of the guidance is really limiting the use of sharing materials during the classroom, which is important. Also, last but not least, as we're all sitting in here, less than 50, we will be limiting the use of large instructional community spaces to 50 or less personnel. Going into the next part of just school environment, personal items, we already spoke to the bar sharing materials. The one thing that I do want to emphasize here is that we are encouraging to bring students to bring their own personal reusable water bottle. They will have the ability to refill them in the school, but each building is working on a plan on how those will be refilled. And we have a lot of discussion about SNAP, and we do want to limit SNAP, particularly SNAP in a classroom, but we know that the reality is that our preschoolers need SNAP. A lot of our lunch times might be lengthier or more staggered, so there is going to be circumstances where teachers are going to want to allow SNAP, and we will look at providing SNAP in an alternate location, and also if in the classroom, physically distanced at 6 feet and possibly out of the schedules. Breakfast and lunch, we are hoping to provide grab and go breakfast that can be taken home, and the students can have the breakfast for the next day. And during the lunch period, our team felt it was very important for the kids to have the opportunity to go to a different space of the building during the day and to move. Of course, we're going to have movement breaks and outdoor breaks, but we thought lunchtime, we have wonderful facilities where we can accommodate groups of 50 safely while they're eating. So that is a time that they will move, or we're hoping they will move to a different location to eat lunch, where their masks will be removed and they will be able to have lunch together. We are encouraging boxed lunches, or families, of course, can send lunch with their students to limit students going through lines. Outdoor recess, we are recommending removal of face masks, as John had mentioned before. A big part of what we talked about is the use of playground equipment. And at this time, we felt that suspending the use of playground equipment was the safest measure to take, particularly at the beginning when kids are being used to social distancing rules. But it's something that we can revisit as we get back on site and see how things are going through kids are using their face masks. Face masks and having to follow social distancing guidelines, I should say physical distancing guidelines. Extracurricular and other activities, clubs, we would like to offer as many clubs virtually as possible. We do know that outdoor sports at this time can be offered in person, as long as physical distancing can be maintained. This will change depending on our state guidance, but as of now, we do feel that we can safely offer outdoor physical activities. When we touched on curricular nights, but I do want to say that at this point, our team felt that field trips, assemblies, and other large gatherings should be suspended for in person, and then at some point virtually, we could provide some opportunities for that. Facility use by outside groups will be suspended, aside from Ivy League, which we have a working relationship to provide before and after school care to our families. Last but not least, obviously very important, is transportation and cleaning. Transportation definitely requires the use of face masks, although we are going to minimize the amount of students on the bus to 50 or less. We do feel that face masks should be worn at all times. That is all of the guidance sets that. And we are encouraging there to be assigned seats and for siblings to sit together during that time, which sometimes that's a nice separation for them, but we're encouraging them to actually sit together during that period to and from school if using the bus. We have worked with our bus companies, and they have assured us that buses will be sanitized and disinfected in between routes. That may lead us to longer times between routes for our elementary and our middle school students, but that's something that we'll be working out dependent upon the plan that's approved, and that will be shared with you and with families once school starts. Cleaning, I'm definitely not the expert on cleaning, but our Director of Buildings and Grounds and Matt Shanahan and his team have done an amazing job researching all of the proper cleaning procedures, and we know that this is a very important part of our plan in reopening school. We are going to assure that all the custodial staff have updated training on all the new CDC and OSHA guidelines that are in place based on COVID. We will have increased daily cleaning, and if we choose this plan and have Mondays as a remote day, there will be additional deep cleaning and sanitation done on those Mondays when the students are not present in the buildings. We felt that was a good time to do that extra cleaning. I know that they are looking to increase temporary custodial staff, really to touch upon those high-touch traffic areas in the building. That is a priority for us. Disinfectant will be provided to all teachers so that they can feel free to use that throughout the day if they feel that they, you know, for example, if a student mask has been removed and they feel they need to clean that individual student desk or any common area. And I know that Matt and his team have talked a lot about the fresh air intakes and adjusting those within the building to allow and maximize the fresh air that's flowing through the building. So those are some of the recommendations for school environment. As we move on to our general health and wellness safety guidelines, we will see that it covers quite a few areas. The first and foremost is the PPE. I'm not going to reiterate much of what has already been said, except that face masks are required for all ages. That's what we are recommending. We know this will be challenging, but we will take it seriously as we do teaching routines at the beginning of the year. We'll be teaching our kids routines on how to properly use their face mask. Students and staff are going to be encouraged to use a face mask of their choosing. However, we will have those available on site to assure that kids and staff have access to those. We are also, our team felt very strongly that we should have face shields on site as well. This is not to be used in lieu of face masks, but in addition to face masks for those situations where you are working hands-on with students in a smaller, more intimate environment. We felt that that extra layer of PPE was necessary for our staff and for the students. So we will hope to have face shields available. And last but not least, we know that there are students that under special circumstances may have difficulty using a face covering. Our goal is to work with those students to get them to use a face covering, but that's when that additional accommodated PPE can be used. And we know that we feel strongly that most of our students can learn how to use a face mask appropriately. We'll be working with families in order to do so. However, if there's a student that really cannot adhere to those guidelines, they may not be eligible for in-person instruction. So next, if we move to our health and hygiene practices, we were definitely focused on increased hand washing and sanitizing throughout the day. Our team even got into the details of when that would occur and how often that would occur. Again, very building specific, but based on the numbers of students, if we were to approve and choose a hybrid model, we feel very confident that our facilities allow us to have the space to do adequate hand washing throughout the day. So we're very comfortable with that. We also know that we need to have much more signage and visual reminders available to all of our students and our staff members to remind them of the proper procedures. If we want to move to symptoms and temperature checks, so all students, as I mentioned earlier, we will be requiring symptoms and temperature checks. This is something that will be over-communicated to families, so we will apologize in advance, but this is something that will be sent out through your email and hard copies and every other way that we can as to what the symptoms of COVID are and what you should be looking for when you're doing your daily self-certification. There's also going to be questions as part of that self-certification, such as, has your child ever been diagnosed or has been exposed to someone in your household that isn't tested positive for COVID? We have all seen those questions, but that's something that our team and our transition team as a whole felt very strongly that these were absolutely necessary steps to keep our students and staff safe. Then, as we move on, we know that there's a high likelihood that someone, regardless of all of the things that we put in place to keep our students and staff safe. We will have personnel or students that may become COVID symptomatic. So we have set guidelines about what happens if you do become COVID symptomatic. Please expect the nurses to ask you if you're calling in sick what your symptoms are. They do that now, but they will be really targeting those symptoms of COVID when they are talking to parents as absences are being reported. Schools are actually required to have what are called quarantine rooms. They've also been referred to as isolation rooms, but our team definitely did not like that word. Quarantine rooms are for students and staff that may have COVID symptoms. And of course, we're socially distanced, they will be monitored, but the big part of what we need to share with our community is that it is a requirement that students that would be placed in a quarantine room would need to be picked up by someone within 30 minutes. So it's going to be something that we take very seriously, and as with all of this, and just want to kind of put that out there right now, that we would really need to have parent contacts and emergency contacts updated so that they can be picked up swiftly if they would need access to the quarantine. As a school district, we are required to do contact tracing. We will be working to look at how that is going to be done, but really that daily symptom checker is critical in our contact tracing efforts. And then there's also procedures that will be shared with families and with staff about what to do if you test positive for COVID. It's very similar to the procedures that you've seen from the IDPH that are posted everywhere. I'm not going to read those to you. You will have those in detail. And last but not least, this is a huge part of this. We have always had students and staff that struggle with social, emotional, and mental health. And this is an important part of what we do. It was a priority area for us when we closed down in March. Our main priority was the health and safety, and not just the physical health, but the mental health. And this will continue to be our focus. All students will be screened upon returning to school in a developmentally appropriate manner, just to kind of get a check-in of where they're at social emotionally and what kind of supports they may need. People's circumstances have changed at home. We need to know what additional supports kids need. Staff will also complete a social emotional screener for students within the first 6 weeks of school. We have always done this. We are just going to ask that it's done a little bit sooner. This, alongside other data that we collect, will help guide what students need more support. We have a group of staff that are already, throughout the summer, they have been participating in professional development regarding trauma-informed practices. This is something that we are learning about. It's not a curriculum, it's not a thing, it's really a mindset on how to support our families, our students, and really how to take care of ourselves, and how our self-care is really a big part of how we respond to students that are in crisis. We will also have, our community is going to have access to a request for assistance form. So if you are a family that needs assistance or just needs to speak to the principal or the social worker or to a director, you will be able to confidentially fill out a form that will go to person A, and we will direct you to the right person for assistance. We feel it's important to have that for our community, particularly at this time. And as you know, we pushed out, Keegan has done a wonderful job of updating our resource page on our website. We're going to continue to update our resources and really make those available, because we are very fortunate in this area that we also have a lot of community resources that families can access. And that's it for my school part.
So that's a lot, in a lot of different categories. It was kind of a big thing for me to ask the board for comments and questions on. But I do want to know, what are your initial impressions? How do you feel about what you heard? And to what extent do you think we're on the right track or wrong track? And what additional work or information would you like us to do or provide so we can get from here to an approved transition plan? Does anybody have any opening thoughts or comments?
I guess I'm happy to start unless someone else does.
What?
All right, so I mean, I would just say, I guess it's pretty disappointing to hear that the plan at this point is for our kids to be home 60% of the time. And I'm cognizant of the fact that, you know, we have all these guidelines that we're supposed to be following that are handed down by ISB and the CDC and everyone else, but what I'm struggling to pass is this. We're putting a tremendous cost on our children, in my opinion, they were deprived of in-person learning, really. They were deprived of, you know, you know, in the spring, it was a scramble, and it's not gas dispersion, but it wasn't a great experience for the kids, I don't think, in the spring. And now we're asking them to come back, and they're going to be set further behind, I think. I mean, realistically, we're going to do the best we can under this, but it's not going to be the same. It's just not. And so what I'm wondering is, you know, it seems like the benefits of following these guidelines to a T, I think one could question the marginal benefit. I guess this is what I'm getting at. It seems to me that we're able, based on a 3-foot distance, to have about 2/3 capacity in our classroom. Based on those numbers, I think we usually have like the low 20s for elementary, and we're talking about 15 or 16, and at CMS we're talking about high 20s, and it'll be low 20s. So what I'm wondering is, you know, if we went to 5 days a week and we required masks and we required self-certification and we had staggered start and stop times, we had staggered passing periods. We were able to spread kids out, you know, in lockers, maybe have every other locker for a classroom so that everyone's spread out at the lockers, and, you know, and add all that. And instead of having 3 feet of distance between desks, we had 2 feet of distance between the desks. Would we be able to have a full-time in-person experience for our children and yet get 80% of the benefit of what's being told we need the guidelines, what the guidelines are telling us? It seems like we're kind of taking an all or nothing approach here. And it seems to me that if we were to push the envelope on maybe 1 or 2 guidelines, we could have, you know, that might be a marginal decrease in safety, but in exchange for a tremendous increase in student experience. And until I get a sense of how those costs align, how the benefits, the safety benefits of all of these actions align with the costs that we're asking our children to take on, it's going to be very difficult for me to get on board with this point. Those are my initial thoughts. I appreciate all the work that everyone's put in. I know this is not how anyone wanted to spend their summer. There's so many considerations, and I get that, and I don't want to come down on anyone. I just think that this can be approached maybe from a little bit different angle. You know, what are the costs versus what are the benefits? And I think we could reduce the safety benefits marginally, or at least I think the potential is there to, if we lighten the safety restrictions marginally, we could achieve significantly better outcomes for our students. Or I think that's something that we need to be spent investment in. So that's my initial thoughts.
I don't have a mic. I'm sorry I was later than that. I come from the meeting out there. Aside from the not following the letter of the law. Just from a business aspect, that means that your insurance isn't gonna cover it.
Can I address that real quick? Because one thing that I've already had Jeff Carlson, I mean, there are riders who can purchase potentially to insurance contracts. That would be something we would look into. I would think, I've actually spoke with Jeff Carlson about that one time. Also, to my knowledge, issue is not the law. Just like what we say in the school board, it's not the law. It's the board of education. They don't make the law. We're not breaking the law, we're just breaking guidelines. If we if we give guidelines and someone doesn't follow them, they would broke the law. Just like Disney gives guidelines and we don't follow them, we broke the law.
Guidelines set by the highest state board of education, the highest education board of the state. And they have spent, obviously, this entire time researching and putting their work into creating guidelines for the school district of Illinois. And I have a really hard time thinking that we would say, those are great, thanks, Izzy. We don't like that. But that is not something that I'm interested in whatsoever.
We definitely. Go ahead, thank you.
Well, I'm good, thank you.
Dr. State, there are no mandates for this guideline.
They're guidelines, man, so there's some question among it's not clear from a liability standpoint where following or not following the guidelines puts you. Rick is right in saying that they're guidelines and not laws. Darcy's right in saying that evidence of us not following the guidelines wouldn't work in our favor if we were challenged, or if, God forbid, something went wrong, someone got sick. But they are, in fact, guidelines and not law. The General Assembly and Governor have not resolved to make them law.
If we give it consideration to maybe starting in person and things change in the state with the hybrid model?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, no, we haven't given consideration to starting a hybrid model of being prepared to go completely remote should things change in the state of Illinois or in the district.
But not starting out in school.
Not full time now. The number of students we would need to choose 100% remote learning in order for us to meet the 3 feet in between students in the classroom guideline, we don't have enough interest in full remote to bring the population of schools down enough to do that effectively in every classroom.
Even if you did like a split schedule.
Well, that's the hybrid. That's what we presented is the hybrid is half the kids coming to school one day and the other half coming the other day, which just naturally cuts your population in half, and that allows us the space within the school building to keep kids away from each other.
So that would be the first factor now that they discussed.
Either of the hybrid models keep us under that. The option 2 in the hybrid model gets the class sizes down the most, but they're not getting as much direct instruction in that second.
That is serious, because if you give kids too much extra time, they're not going to do that. Well, that's my opinion, being a teacher, but you have to be on it all the time, so I understand where you're going with the hybrid 1 model, but the version 2 model, I would just let know right now, I wouldn't discuss it, just so you know where I'm at.
Yeah, so the key to hybrid 1 working is if our surveys are correct and we're right about how many families are going to choose 100% remote. If we're right about that number, we can do hybrid 1 right now. The problem would be is if they hear about hybrid 1 and they like it so much that they sign up for it instead of remote, the ones that said they were going to do remote. If there's too many to sign up for hybrid 1, we'd have to go to hybrid 2 because there'd be too many students. But right now, we did a recent survey, and it sure seems like a good third or more of parents regardless of the in-person model, want remote learning. And if they sign up for that and they agree to do 5 hours of remote instruction daily, 5 days a week, then the students that want the hybrid one model, we can offer the hybrid one model very effectively in all campuses. So at some point after the board decides on a transition plan, we're going to need to ask parents again, and we're going to need to ask them to commit to a model. We'll describe the whole plan, describe what their options are, ask them to choose. And then what they choose will be their choice through the first trimester. And of course, we'll allow them to change between and among the plans every trimester until this thing's over. And we can go back to normal.
I had another question, just for my information. Has the state given any kind of proof or any kind of law to school opening whatsoever? Are they just leaving it up to individual school boards?
It's up to individual school boards. You know, they released that guidance. The governor supports ISB's guidance. The emphasis is on returning to the school building to the extent that you can do so safely. But the state board recognizes that every school district is different. There's a number of school districts in the state that can't effectively do remote learning because they don't have the technology infrastructure. There are school districts that are dramatically overcrowded and couldn't possibly allow their students to all come back to the classroom, where half of them need to be home every given day in order to fit with any kind of social distancing at all. So the state boards release these guidelines. These are the state's tights. We use 146. The looses are how we apply it to our everyday life. And what you saw tonight is our best first effort at providing as much in-person instruction as we can and feel like we're still adhering to the guidelines with regards to social distance.
So if we go through and we follow all the social distancing and we do everything that they're asking to do, and something happens where a majority of the kids get sick, what's the liability of the district?
Yeah, we don't know that. That's something that superintendents and business managers and attorneys are talking a lot about. I don't think that schools should assume that if there's an infection that it necessarily happened at school. You look at what's happening out in society, people walking down the street unmasked and walking through Target unmasked and all those other things. Private business isn't required to follow strict guidelines the way public schools are. We're an entity of the government, so when the government puts out regulations, we follow.
I just asked because some,
Yeah, it's a real risk.
some people are assumed that it's not.
Yeah, you know,
but
sure.
what do you think about?
I think that's very real, Vince. I think that that's going to be something that many school districts, maybe most school districts, at least get a taste of. The most important thing to me, and I know what's most important to the board, is that we don't cause anyone to get sick. Like, we want high levels of learning for all students. That's what motivates us. That's the reason why we came into education. Right now, what we're trying to do is as much of that as we can and stay safe. We're in a very unusual and unsafe world right now because of this virus. And we know a lot more about it than we did 6 months ago. But in the greater scheme of things, we don't know everything about it yet. And I can sleep at night if somebody is a month or 2 behind their reading level that they would have been if there had never been a virus. I can't sleep at night if someone gets sick because we got this wrong. That's why it was, and that was a majority. I mean, there was nobody shaking their head at that.
Well, thank you for putting safety first, I think that's most important.
The important reaction to Rick's comments is, I mean, we don't know. Like, we trust the experts, we trust the medical profession to the extent that they understand the virus. They say that 6 feet is safe if you're unmasked. they're saying everybody must wear a mask in school, no matter how far apart you are, unless you're eating or band or outdoors. But they believe that it's safe for us to sit 3 feet apart if we're all masked. And the other health organizations agree. It's not like that's not a controversial statement. Rick said, man, if they're safe within 2 feet, are they safe or within 3 feet, are they safe within 2? I don't know the answer. If I knew the answer was yes, then we'd be right within 2 feet, we get more kids in the building. All we can do is trust the doctors, and their current today guidance says if students are masked, they're safe if they're 3 feet apart. So we measured at least 3 in all the classrooms to see what the capacity were. In fact, I think most of the principals used 4. So if we made that guideline less, we could fit more kids. What do you want? I know no one wants anyone to get sick. Nobody wants anyone to get sick. So how do you want to do it? You know, it's tough.
Monday was chosen as the remote day.
Yeah, you want to read it?
Yeah, why was Monday chosen as the remote day?
Initially, we had Friday chosen as the remote day, but then it occurred to us that we've got a number of sick days scheduled on Fridays, and we've got a number of holidays scheduled on Mondays. We thought if we moved the sick days to Mondays, and the holidays were already on Mondays, then we would have fewer days missed of in-person instruction. Our original draft of this had Monday, Wednesday, and Tuesday, Thursday as the hybrid days, with everybody remote learning on Friday. The problem is the kids that are Monday, Wednesday would get hosed, because we've got a lot of Mondays off for holidays, and we've got a lot of Mondays off we've got a lot of Fridays off for sick. So if you were in we think that so we got holidays on Mondays, we got sick days on Fridays, and we thought, well, we can't move the holidays are on holiday. We can move the sick days to the day that has all the holidays, and make that an at-home day, so that nobody's missing their in-person days as much.
And do you offhand how many families participated in the surveys?
Yes, we know exactly how many. But do you have that number for you?
Yeah, it came out to about 70%.
It's big, it's like 1,400.
Yeah, we had like 1742 in the last survey.
1,700 families.
Yeah.
It's a big number.
Yeah, it's a good pool.
It was a big enough number where we felt like the results were statistically significant enough where we thought we could fairly apply those results to the non-respondents. It's a big enough sample where it's really unlikely that everybody who didn't answer would be in one group or the other. It was a really impressive number. So that was interesting. We're talking about how do we staff hybrid 1. And we've got a number of teachers, certified staff, that aren't doing classroom direct instruction. We've got math specialists, we've got reading specialists, we have 4 teachers at the elementary, we've got media center directors that are certified teachers. But we really think that if, I should have started by saying, I don't know. The reason why I don't know is because it depends. When you look at that survey has all respondents in every grade level at every school. Well, we're going to have a few anomalies. We're going to have a grade level at Fear that almost all want to come to school, and a grade level at Cruz where everybody wants to stay home. There's going to be a few outliers. And when that's the case, then we need to create additional or fewer sections in those areas. So the idea of a Fear remote teacher teaching a Cruz kid needs to be available to us. We need that resource available. The idea of having a math specialist instead teaching a math section, or having a media center clerk teaching a section, not a media center director, teaching a section of English language arts. Those are things that we're going to need to be able to do in order to make, certainly to make option 1 hybrid work effective.
be. So after we've exhausted all of those internal resources, then we'll get to the bottom of exactly what we need. We think it's going to be 2 or 3 or 4 teachers. The good news is, like, these are temporary circumstances, and they cause some expenses to go way up, and they also bring some expenses down. So Jeff and I have been talking real regularly. Jeff Charleston, our business manager, and I have been talking real regularly about our ability to handle a deficit for 1 year if necessary, whether or not we would even be in a deficit situation. So once the district has a plan, then we can go and actually staff it with our actual kids. We'll ask parents whether or not they're coming back, what grade are you in, what school are you at, and get to the bottom of how the staff is going to play out. But of course, the board has final say. At any point, you can go, whoa, that's too much new staff, we need to do hybrid 2, or we need to go back to the drawing board, or whatever the case may be. So hiring, those are all board decisions, so they'll all have. I don't think it's going to be more than a handful, but I don't know that yet. I will also say that the importance of the availability of teacher and support staff subs is paramount, and we're in a teacher shortage. So the quality of applicants, the number of applicants, these are all down. The circumstances, the economy haven't changed that. Just about every person who's licensed to be a teacher that wants to be teaching has a job in the state of Illinois. There's not a lot sitting at home hoping for one. And the ones that are the ones that haven't got a job yet. There's some diamonds out there too. I'm not characterizing the whole field, but it's a tough time to find lots more high quality teachers. That's why we would consider our internal staff first and redeploying and reassigning. Kind of all hands on deck to get through this stuff, right? You're right.
First of all, I want to commend the administration and staff. This is sorry. Just for a real hard time. Okay. First, I want to commend our administration and our staff for all the work they're doing. This is absolutely a really tough time in education. And to see the outcomes, commitment to our community, our schools, our staff, our students, our families, it's very heartening and absolutely appreciated. You asked where we sit on this. My personal opinion is that I would love for us to do as much in-person instruction that we can safely do. And administration and staff, the hybrid models that are miraculous in staff, then that is where I would look at. I absolutely understand this point about students and where they've lost contact with their friends, they've lost a lot of things. I understand that. It's our job as we go in the room to make sure that everyone remains safe, not just our students, but our faculty and staff as well. So at this point, that's where I would say.
Darcy, between the 2 hybrid models, you like that hybrid 1 better than hybrid 2?
I like anything that gets us smaller class sizes. So that's where I would. And I could stomach hiring a few additional staff if we need to get the numbers down as far as I can.
So you're ready to support either of the 2 hybrid models?
I haven't read the plan completely yet, we only received it this morning. So I haven't dove into the differences between the 2, so I can't give you an opinion on which that I like better. But based on all the thinking that I've been doing and reading on education, that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, we'll comment to the community that the board just received our draft plan late this morning, and the PowerPoint later than that. The administration has been working really long hours to try and nail down as much of this as we can ahead of time, and as a result, we didn't give the board a lot of lead time. So the other thing that I'm going to ask the board is how much time you'd like to live with the plan privately in order to feel like you fully understand it before you're ready to come together and talk about it again. the next time we bring you together, I'm gonna hope that you can ratify a plan. Because the reason is the principals keep looking at their watch saying, man, I need as many days as I can to make the plan, put the plan into practice and assign people to stuff and make it work so that we look like we know what we're doing on the first day of school. So, thank you for saying that, Darcy, because I understand that. That's the reason why we're not asking you to make a decision tonight, is because you didn't have very much time to look at this plan. I hear Vince saying that he really likes hybrid 1 more than hybrid 2. I hear Darcy advocating for small class sizes. I hear Rick advocating for getting as many kids present as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not advocating for either. I'm advocating for, we haven't done enough work about whether we can be safe or not. So that's what I mean.
I'm not sure that there's any way for me to find the answer to that. I mean, I've never heard anybody challenge the health organizations about the issue. And I don't know what they would say if he did.
Yeah, I guess what I'd say is, you know, I mean, we're citing the CDC, I'm citing the health organization. The CDC has said 14 children ages 5 to 14 have died of this since February 1st. That compares to 48 for influenza. And that's after flu season's over. I mean, we don't have means for influenza. So when we're talking about kids, I mean, there's 41 million kids a day in this country. I mean, you know, you don't, like you said, you don't want any harm to befall anyone, but, you know, we have to, I mean, it's a risk to step out the door every day. And for these kids, the reality is, it doesn't seem like this is a very big risk. Now, it is a bigger risk for the teachers and the staff, no question. But, again, that's where I say it's a manageable. If it's a smaller risk for the children, then maybe it is acceptable for the children to sit a little bit closer to each other. The teacher can still maintain social distancing from the class. I mean, that's not to say the teacher has to sit 2 feet from the kids. And so that's what I'm saying. It seems like we're sort of willing to, we're sort of preliminarily just sort of accepting a lot of costs for what I would say is not, you know, very tangible or at best questionable benefits. And, you know, I understand the appeal to authority, but, you know, for me, I mean, I'm just looking at this from a common sense standpoint, because they're not saying it's not 3 feet is the magic number, it's 3 feet plus mask, plus temperature checks, plus self-certification, plus staggered start and stop. So I'm saying is you can just get a few extra inches between us in the classroom and have all those other things. How much does that cost us in terms of safety? That's all I'm asking, because if we can say it's a very marginal cost safety-wise, then it's like, wow, we can get back to something resembling normal for these kids. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, and Rick, you know me well enough to know that I don't have any problem standing up to Disney or anybody else. The problem is I can't prove that they're wrong. Like, the thing about kids getting sick, they tend not to get sick, but it also seems like they tend to be able to carry it to others, which I can't prove. I don't want Johnny and Timmy to be the reason why their parents get sick.
Yeah, but shouldn't we give some of the agency to their parents? I mean, there's a lot of parents that are opting out into a full, because presumably they know their situation. And they're saying, I'm not comfortable, maybe not with my kids, but with my family's situation. We're giving them that alternative. And rightfully so.
We are.
And so I think I think we also need to listen to the 50% of the parents that said that they would like to have a full in-person experience. Presumably those parents, I would like to think that they've considered this as much as anyone, and they come to a different conclusion about the risk for their kids and their family. So, as far as taking it home to mom and dad, I think that the parents of this district have hopefully made that decision one way or the other themselves, and I'm willing to respect them enough to let them make that decision.
Although I think the number of families that choose to come back will differ based on how serious we are about safety when they're here. I think if we said, you're gonna be all day in full classrooms at 2 feet spacing, we're gonna make more masks, we're gonna still do all the other things, that fewer families would return than if we said, we're gonna follow all safety guidelines and keep 3 feet apart. I don't know how many, it's all conjecture, we just, stipulate, but sure. I'm also concerned, like you said, I haven't asked the teachers whether or not they would feel safe with more students if they were at a greater distance from them. That's a question that I hadn't thought of. That's a question that I will ask now. But in a minute, we're going to hear from the parents whether or not they think they're people. I'm interested to hear what they think too. So, Rick, you and I both don't want any of our teachers to get sick if some decision we made about cost anyway. I mean, if either one of us knew that someone was going to get sick, if we did this or didn't do that, we wouldn't do it, we would. You know, like you.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot of different variables. If you say, so I was looking at some of the numbers. So you say people aged 25 to 65 have been 22,000 deaths. Okay, that's terrible. Nobody wants 22,000 people, right? That's out of 173 million people in this country. You say that, and over the same period of time, 310,000 total deaths for that group of people. So you say, okay, in the last 6 months, if you're age 25 to 65, there's a 0.18% chance that you're going to not make it. You're not going to live to see the end of those 6 months. And so if you say, okay, because of COVID-19, that 0.18% chance goes to 0.2% chance? Should we shut down the schools for that? To me, that's when you frame it that way. Then it's like, okay, yeah, it's a risk, but it's a risk to do anything. And to me, that's not a huge risk.
The risk to not have to think about the loss, risk not to do lots of things there.
Yeah, that's my point. And so what I'm just saying is you say that, you say, you're right, it might be a month or 2 or 3 behind in the reading. But we're not talking about 8 kids, we're talking about, how many kids are in the district? 4,000 kids or something? How many? 13, 2,600. So 26, so we're talking about 2,600 in the reading. And that we know. So that's to me where I think, that's where I think, some work is still be done. But to get to the bottom of those questions as best we can before we decide to move on to something that's pretty radically different than what we've done in the past.
I have a question about the data. You said we had 70% response. Was it, what I'm thinking of is, if we get too many wanting to opt in or opt out in one building, one grade, how are we going to resolve that?
A good amount of it can be resolved through staff reassignment or assigning kids from one school who have selected remote learning to a teacher of that grade level from another school. There's ways that are harmless for us to mitigate a good amount. Now, if Fulton says they're coming back, and everybody here says they're staying home, we've got a bigger problem. But our responses were proportional throughout the district for our populations throughout the district, and they were also pretty well distributed among grade levels. So it was a big enough sample where we think it's representative of the whole population. We'll have a couple anomalies, but we've got some really smart people to know how to adapt to that.
And I would also, the first option is obviously better.
You like that hybrid one model better than hybrid two?
I think. My only other concern is the rigor between e-learning and being in the classroom. They're going to lose something that. And we didn't have any kind of, option whether that would be on Monday or Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, Friday. Which group they're going to be.
Well, they'll be in the same group as their siblings, sure, because we don't want families having to do double duty. We haven't talked about what choice families would have about which group.
I'm thinking so the parents can balance work life,
Childcare.
childcare, and they work out better for the parents to get it in one or the other.
Well, we can give parent choice to the extent that we can give parent choice. If one of them is wildly more popular than the other, there's going to be something we might figure out.
Like to try to accommodate everybody who wants to. And also the procedures that things comes out a little bit, staff member comes out a little bit, staff member's family comes out. What do we do then?
Yeah, that is some of the stuff that's really clear in the guidance. And the doctors know a lot about it, we know little about, so we just, our intention is just copy and paste the guidance about how to react when somebody gets sick or somebody in the household gets sick. The people still get sick when schools are being closed, so we know that that's going to be a reality. So it goes away.
Whether we go to phase 5, just reopening the next day, or how we doing?
We haven't talked about that, but it sure seems to me that we can just go back to business as usual. Although the state's gonna, I don't know if the state's gonna say we're in phase 5 the day that vaccine is available, or after a certain percent of the population got it, or what the rules would be, but bring on I can't wait to get to that question. Bring on the phase 5.
Okay, Jeff, I know you were talking about remote positions being only a certain amount of positions available, correct? So a certain amount of remote positions available. So that those, not everybody that wanted to do the remote teaching would be able to do it. I did a consideration was that there are many existing conditions, non-practical teachers.
Yeah, absolutely, Vince. So, you're quoting my comment really accurately. It was that I wanted a model that we could give every teacher the choice of what they do. But the problem is you have to have enough teachers at school to break the kids up into enough groups at school that the class sizes are small. So I don't know how many teachers would prefer to work remotely, but I'm almost certain that it's more than the number of remote teaching positions that we have.
Right, and I'm just checking to make sure that those people that have this stuff, you had also mentioned their election hearing.
Yes, there are, I'm sure, we've got 500 employees, we've got 350, 380-ish certified teachers. There's a lot of adults that work for us. So I know that there are adults in the organization out there that have ADA qualifying disabilities or conditions that put them in an at-risk group, and they will be assigned to the remote teaching positions first. The problem is going to be if we have more teachers with qualifying illnesses than we have remote teaching spots, the only alternative for them will be to take a leave, and then we don't have enough teachers. That's where we need to hire more staff, or hopefully we can get subs. HR is working on ways to recruit additional subs in all categories. I'm thinking about custodians. We're going to be wiping down the building a lot more frequently than we usually do. Our buildings are clean. We do a really good job keeping our buildings clean. But the type of cleaning we're going to need to do, between one group using the lunchroom and another group using the lunchroom, going to be heightened. We don't need it to just look clean, we need it to be disinfected, which is different. So we're gonna need more of everybody at different times. And one of the concerns is if we've got not enough healthy teachers to do all of the in-person teaching jobs, that's a problem that we have to remedy in a hurry, and a teacher shortage. So that's a real challenge for us. But no, Vince, we're not going to ask any teachers that have qualifying components of disability to come and teach in person. But we're not legally allowed to do that. Nor will we. Thank you.
Are you ready for me? I think it's on. Good afternoon. There are a lot of people in this room and online who may not know who I am, so let me begin with an introduction. My name is Julie Harris, and I'm a teacher at Central Middle School, and I'm also the union president representing over 200 union members of District 146. I like to think of the educators in District 146 as highly intelligent individuals who always have the best interests of their students each and every day when they walk into their classrooms. Actually, I know this to be the case. I've seen it firsthand for the past 17 years. The educators of District 146 are also quick thinkers and learners and can adapt to new situations in a pinch. Just think of how quickly they transitioned to the remote learning when the state went into lockdown and canceled in-person learning. At first we thought it would only be for a week, maybe two, but as reality set in, and we learned we wouldn't get to see our students in person for the remainder of the year, we got to work. Remote learning was something that the educators of District 146 have been asking for years. To be used in events like a blizzard. Never imagining that it would be used for a period of nearly 4 months due to a worldwide pandemic. We quickly mobilized and did the best that we could, given very little time to transition to the new normal of remote learning. Flash forward several months to where Flash forward several months toward the incredible, nearly impossible task has been given to districts to plan to reopen our schools safely. We are very thankful to administration for allowing 2 union members, 1 support staff union member, and a representative from our local to serve on the reopening committee. Now, I was asked by a fellow teacher what the union stance was on reopening. And believe it or not, that was a difficult question to answer. We have teachers who want to be in front of students 5 days a week for full days. We have teachers who are more comfortable with the hybrid model. We have teachers who have underlying medical conditions that will not allow them to be in front of children until it is completely safe to do so. We also have teachers with no underlying medical conditions, yet they care for elderly parents who may be compromised. We have teachers that may have a child or a spouse at home who may be susceptible. We also have teachers that are just plain scared to return to school. The reach of COVID is so completely unknown, and every day it seems symptoms change, CDC guidelines change, rules and regulations change, and infection rates change. So when I answered that teacher, my response was, the union wants what is safe for teachers and students to be able to limit learning loss, yet protect ourselves and our loved ones from highly contagious disease. The plan that was submitted to you today was received by the union this morning, and after having a short time to review it, I do have some concerns on behalf of the teachers that I represent. The first being that 22 students in a classroom at CMS is a very high number. Consider the fact that many classrooms are co-taught, have a paraprofessional, and have other support staff pitching in. This could put nearly 25 students and teachers into one classroom. Given normal circumstances, class sizes at CMS average are 26 to 27. This is not a significant decline in class size to allow for required social distancing. Look around this huge room. It's been set up to be socially distanced and allows for 40 seats for audience members. The size of this room is best guess the size of 3 or 4 of our classrooms. Are we really putting the safety of our students and teachers first with such large class sizes? We must remember that we are talking about a disease that can make a teacher or student very ill or even worse. Everywhere we go in public, people are asked to socially distance for at least 6 feet. Why is that different for schools? What makes middle school students and teachers less susceptible to COVID than those at the elementary level of classrooms 8 to 12, given version 2 of the hybrid model? A second very important thing that is missing from this plan, and it's been talked about a little bit here, is the issue of substitute teachers. Even in normal times, our district is short substitute teachers every day. Currently, when there's no sub, teachers are asked to combine classrooms or split classrooms and take a class in half. This is a matter of when, not if, a sub will be needed. Perhaps as early as day 1, a teacher may not be able to attend school. We often depend on retired teachers to be our subs. Will someone in an age group most susceptible to COVID really want to substitute for a mere $120 a day, putting their lives at risk? Possibly shifting specialists to becoming classroom teachers will take away any chance we have of having subs. Who will be there when teachers get sick to take over for their responsibilities? What will happen when a teacher is out sick or quarantined for 2 weeks? When their children or elderly parents get sick? Will we ask teachers to double up on classrooms once again, putting teachers at more significant risk? What other option will we have? Having substitutes in the building is a need and something that should be further discussed, especially the specialists that are going to be utilized elsewhere. Next, given the numbers for the hybrid models, both version 1 and version 2, I must call to question the numbers. The viability of either plan succeeding is dependent on our ability to staff those plans. While the need is absolute for smaller class sizes for safety reasons, more than 63% of the latest parent survey had parents choosing 5 full days of in-school learning. Our classrooms cannot accommodate that number of students in class, even with a minimum of 3 feet of social distancing. We would need more teachers and more classrooms to accomplish every parent request. Our parents are aware of the space and staffing limitations, and if given a choice, that their choice may not be honored, or will classes be overloaded to accommodate every parent request, thus putting the in-person learning population and teachers at greater risk. Additionally, even if we are able to limit the in-person class sizes, according to the proposal, 35 to 40 students in one remote classroom is an absolutely impossible task. Could you imagine having 35 to 40 first graders in one remote classroom? Besides the impossible task of getting them to maintain focus in such large classes, the teachers are responsible for assessing, for grading, and providing small group instruction. This nearly doubles the size of what the elementary teachers have in normal times. Finally, I ask that the plan remain consistent in locking parents into a choice and not allow families to transfer at will between hybrid and remote learning. This creates great strain on classroom teachers and could add to the in-person class size. I thank you all for your time. We know that there is no easy solution to this. Safety and well-being of our students and teachers need to be at the forefront of any final decision making. We cannot afford to overlook any details, especially when the lives of our teachers, their families, our students, and our 146 community are at stake. Thank you guys for your time.
Is there any more questions from the board? Like, at this time, I'd like to open up for public comment. If there's anybody that would like to take a statement, come forward. I think we signed the meeting.
Sure. Well, hand sanitizer might be needed on your. Okay. So, hi, Katie. First, I want to thank everybody for the 25 folks that you have this summer. Thanks for all your time and effort. As a parent with two small kids, I really appreciate it. And my company, we always say safety first. That's, I work at a company that makes construction materials, so safety is really important, and I appreciate that. So I just have a question about the hybrid. And the day that you guys indicated would be like the deep clean day was on Monday. And I get it because of the Monday, Friday. What about having same group go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday's deep clean, Thursday, Friday is the other group? That would allow like consistency instead of having it staggered the kids every other day, and then you have like deep clean every day. So if you give any thought to 2 consecutive days and then 2 consecutive days with deep clean in there. So that was just my question.
Hello. My name is Amy Hammerick. I am an educator myself, and I am a parent of 2 children. I can't imagine that you would risk putting our children closer and risking their lives. The numbers say what they say, and I get it. But the closer you put them and squeeze them together, the bigger risk of my child getting sick. You can't do that. You can't. You also need to understand that all those parents who want their kids to go full time might only be saying that because that is their only choice. They are working families with nowhere else to go. And it's not the best choice. I am in that boat. I do not want my kids here because I'm fearful of what will happen. But I have a job. I'm like these teachers, and I have to go do my job too. I can't quit. I have a husband who works. My kids will probably end up going to school here as much as they can, and I have no idea what I'm going to do on this remote learning base. I have no idea. We cannot let e-learning fail the way it did first. It was rough. It was so challenging. I was doing it too. I get it. I really, really ask district, please, with so much more effort into getting robust education. I mean, really focusing on how they're going to work with those students. My kids are doing summer school right now. I have a first grader in a summer school class with 4 teachers. It's loud. The teachers are always talking when the kids should be working. It's a challenge. There are maybe 8 little first graders in there, and in the span of 2 hours, we do a certain activity, a book, and a math or a science video. In 2 hours, we do 3 small things because it's that hard for little ones to manage going here, looking there, going here. Everyone listening, and talking here, and chatting here. I value what we get out of it, but if it's going to be e-learning, it's going to have to be better, which means more staff, because you can't put that many people in this room. You can't. It needs more staff. Middle school is my world, and just from what I experienced in my own personal world, you need more staff in middle school persons if that's going to happen for just the behavior alone. And I pray and I hope that the admin will support those staff in enforcing every single guideline in restriction that's set up. Because what happens when kids don't want to follow those rules? Are they slapped on the hand and sent back to class? Or are they called and sent home? Your kid won't wear a mask. I guess that's it. Thank you.
Can I just come to say that I will have 3 children attending the school district year as well? So I think consideration for these places, they order the things for the time as well. I obviously want the best of
Hi, my name is David Saraki. I have 3 children that will be attending District 146 this year. I really appreciate all the hard work you guys did. It's a ton of work. You're in a completely impossible situation. You're not going to make everyone happy. I've seen those surveys you talked about. I participated in a couple of surveys. The last survey, me and my family did participate because we didn't know all the details. We definitely didn't want to get locked into one of those boxes. We're kind of in the middle. I mean, I completely understand everyone's concern. I've seen those numbers that you're referring to with the extremely low risk for the children. I'm not a huge fan, especially with my daughter starting in kindergarten, wearing a mask all day, but I understand that other people at risk also. There's teachers who be worried about people that have, or taking care of people, elderly people. But we can't forget though that, I mean, these masks, as good as they are, it's basically a t-shirt. This isn't meant to protect for that. So I understand all the social distancing and everything that we're trying to accomplish. I would like my children to be in school as much as possible. The e-learning it seemed as simple as they made it seem. There was too many different apps, there's too many different ways to contact teachers. It was just, I know that you guys are dealing with an impossible situation the best you can for the end of the school year, but definitely it needs to be, that part needs to be simplified if there is going to be e-learning at home. It just seemed like it was too much. I mean, me personally, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of, especially my kindergartner wearing the mask all day. And that to me, that just seems like it's going to be impossible. I don't know how we're going to manage that in the classroom. I know that's going to be very difficult to do. And like I said, I mean, it's just going to be, that's going to be really tough for everyone. If we are taking this as serious as we all mentioned, as you guys mentioned in your presentation, the self-certification symptom checker at home, to me, that doesn't really seem like a great idea. That's something that all parents should have been doing forever, making sure you don't send your kid to school sick. But parents do send their kids to school sick, especially parents who both have jobs and don't have somewhere to take care of, someone else to watch their kid. They send their kid to school, then they get a phone call from the nurse saying your kid's not feeling good. Me personally, at my place of business that I work, we have 2 healthcare professionals that check your temperature, they ask you what the symptoms, they even make mistakes, they give a mistake. Someone had contact with someone with COVID, came in and spread it to other people. So now, as serious as we're taking the social distancing in school and separating kids and doing that, we're leaving that, at least from what I understand in the presentation, that's on the parents to do. The self-certification check. So now we're passing that responsibility on to all the parents and hoping that all the parents put everyone else's best interest in mind. Like, I know it would be impossible to do that at the school because of staffing. How do you check everyone's temperature? But if we are taking this as serious as we all hope that we are, I think that's something you can't leave in the hands, especially when it comes to temperatures. and those questions with the parents. Because a lot of parents, they're gonna be complacent, they go, oh, my son, my son or daughter didn't complain this morning. Now you're assuming everyone's doing the right thing that you're doing and then sending them to school. I mean, that just seems to me like you would have to do it at the school, not necessarily home. Like I said, for my place, there's been multiple people get sick because of that. They asked the questions, but still it didn't matter. They asked one of the questions wrong. Oh, it turns out he was in contact with someone. They ended up spreading it to other people. And now you have multiple people sick because of that. So now you're going to have hundreds or thousands of parents that are responsible for that. That just, I don't know, that seems like that wouldn't work for me. And also, the outdoor recess, 6-foot social distancing without masks. I don't know if you guys have driven past the parks. Everyone's supposed to be social distancing. Everyone's supposed to be wearing masks, and nobody's doing it in the parks. All the kids are just playing with each other. And so the recess part of it, without mass social distancing, to me, just seems completely impossible. Like, I don't know how you would manage that feat to have the kids consciously thinking that they have to stay 6 feet apart while they're playing. That, I don't know, that just doesn't seem like it's,
Never had Mrs. Harris as a recess supervisor.
oh, good luck. That's gonna be completely impossible. I don't see how that can work, but. That's pretty much it. I just want to thank you guys again. I mean, I know this is impossible. There's no way that you're going to make everyone happy in this. From what I've seen in those, the hybrid ones seem reasonable. I personally like full days back to school back to normal. It seems like that's not an option though. So I don't know. I want my kids in school as much as possible, all 3 of them. So hopefully some things start changing and get closer to it. So thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Good afternoon. My name is Shane Wilson. My son is a student here at Central. In fact, I believe Ms. Harris was one of the ELA teachers this past year. I want to say first, I came to this meeting with a great deal of trepidation, in part because I haven't been in a room with this many people in 4.5 months, but also because I frankly fully expected to hear how my child is going to be expected to show up for school, show up in unsafe situations. The fact that there is a remote learning component of this, the fact that there is an option to not be forced to come into the school, be forced to interact with large groups of people, is far more reassuring than I could possibly imagine. As has been mentioned several times, this disease is insidious and it is not slowing down. As of yesterday, there were 33,000 cases reported in suburban Cook County alone. And that number is not going down. And every time we think we can relax, everything's better, it goes back up. And it goes back up in large group situations. I'm afraid, Mr. Lloyd, that I think your data is completely without context. To say that a limited number of children have died, a very small number, ignores the fact that a limited number of children have been exposed. We closed schools in March. We made sure that children were away from group situations. The places where we're seeing the most deaths are healthcare facilities and prisons and senior citizen homes, places where you're not going to find children. To open up schools to say, it's okay now, kids won't get it, kids will be fine, is a massive lab experiment that I think is incredibly dangerous and ignores the meaning of that data, that children haven't gotten because we worked so hard to protect them, and that we should be dropping our guard now. I apologize because I feel like I have about 26,000 thoughts based on what I've seen today, and I will try to keep it just a couple. Whatever you do, whatever you decide, I implore you to retain a 100% remote learning capacity, in part because I think you're going to need it, because we're still in the first wave, and it's July, and very likely as it gets colder and more people are forced back indoors, and as we think the curve flattens out, even in states like Texas and Florida, where it's very much on the rise, Those people are still going to interact with us here in the United States. And a second wave is likely, and it's likely at the peak of the school year. So I think just as a practical matter, you're going to want that. But I know that I don't want to put my child back in a large group situation. And I say that with the understanding, as Ms. Hammer pointed out, that the remote learning situation in the third trimester of last year was deeply unsatisfying. One of the things, Dr. Stalick, you mentioned was that we want to increase the number of learning hours from 3 to 5. I think it's important to note that those 3 hours were not rich. Those 3 hours were mostly not teaching. They were an email sent to us saying, this is your assignment in social studies. This is the YouTube video you need to go watch for science. It should take you half an hour. That's how 3 hours was achieved. And if we're just increasing the number of minutes that we want to ascribe to an assignment, and we're not adding teaching, we're not adding value, we're not providing any interaction, we're not providing any substance to the education, then it's meaningless. And in that case, my wife and I will be doing what we were thinking we might have to do anyway, which is essentially homeschool our child. At least now, I feel like if there's a remote learning option, then I'll have that ability to, I'll have a syllabus. I'll have something to go on that will inform what I'm trying to teach my child. But I know it can be done. The reason I know it can be done is because we have friends in another school and we managed to get my child in to audit one of their classes. And they were able to Zoom the breakouts that they could bring the kids out into smaller groups and they could have discussions. So they could do a math assignment or they could have a discussion about the reading. And there was a teacher there at all times. And this was a classroom, I think, with at least 20 students. And it was absolutely possible to be done. And I'm not sure all the reasons why it wasn't done. There wasn't enough time to plan for it, or if there were concerns about liability, or there were concerns about the equities of all students having access to this. It is not preferable. It is not ideal, but it is possible to have a meaningful, rich learning experience in a remote fashion over an iPad. Sure, students have. And if we're going to do this, and I think that's our best option is a remote option, I hope we will do everything possible to make sure that that learning experience does happen. And the last thing I'll say about this is, I should be arguing vociferously for an in-person experience. I want a social learning experience for my child more than you can possibly imagine. It's vitally important for him. We've actually have arranged, he meets with the school counselor, or met with the school counselor on a regular basis to improve his social interaction skills, to overcome certain learning challenges that make it difficult for him to interact. So I should absolutely want him in front of other kids, but I'm not willing to do that at the risk of his health. I'm not willing to do that at the risk of his life. And I guess to go back again to your numbers, Mr. Lloyd, I will say, just a quick look at the CDC's website indicated that from February to April, there were 150,000 reported cases. And yes, you're right, the number of those under 18 was small. It was 1.7%. That's still what, 3,000 kids. And if you apply that to the 2,600 kids who are in the school district, we're still saying that we somehow imagine we want to expose a dozen to 2 dozen children to potentially have this disease. And if you do that, then everyone they've interacted with is potentially quarantined. All 20 students in the classroom, all the teachers that they encounter, all the staff that they encounter. And that means you're losing entire classrooms and entire segments of teaching staff for 2 weeks at a time. And that's not even factoring in the fact that the deaths are not the biggest concern. And a lot of people, there's over a 90% recovery rate, but recovery means significant respiratory issues. Recovery means blood clots. Recovery means tiredness and inability to work. We're talking about something that's far more than just dropping dead. We're talking about a life irrevocably changed. I greatly appreciate how hard you worked to come at, to reach this plan, this Solomon-like plan to satisfy the many people who want to get back to normal, and to also satisfy people like me who are very dreadful of what our new normal looks like. But I'll go back to something you said right at the very beginning, Dr. Stay you said nobody wants to be in the middle of a pandemic. And heaven knows that's true. We have to work with the world we have been, not the world we want. And I feel like the world where we say, get back to normal, a world where we say, gotta get kids back together, is trying to live in the world we want. And I find that kind of magical thinking extremely dangerous. It goes against everything that we know factually, and against everything that we suspect based on what we've learned. And so I just encourage you to think about this as you go to approve this plan or as you go to modify this plan. It's not just safety first, but safety first doesn't work in the world we thought we lived in. It works in the world that we're in now. Nobody wants to be in a pandemic, but we are, and we need to start behaving like that. And that means a richer remote learning experience, a much safer in-person learning experience, if that's what people want. But it just means facing the reality that we have. Thank you.
Anybody else?
My name is Joy Beck, and I'm also a teacher in another district. And I have a child who just graduated Central and is going to be going to Andrew, and they haven't put their plan out yet. And I have a son who's in 5th grade at Cruz. So once Andrew puts their plan out on, I think we get the schedule like August 5th. If my kids, like my daughter, can stay home with my son and do, the hybrid model with him, but if their days are opposite, is there a way that we can get them on the same page?
We can try our best to do
Okay.
that. I don't know if we can do that for everybody, but we can do it for a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Caballas, and I have 3 children, 2 in District 146 and another one should be going to so, I am a healthcare worker, and just one suggestion for the teachers that we do in healthcare, we can't always keep our distance or that distance, so we are required to wear masks and a shield. So that would be something that the teachers could take as an option, and they did follow this suggestion of having kids close to the classroom. I am for having our children in the classroom, and I noticed on the graph that it was at least 65% that of the parents that agreed for the in classroom. But yeah, it chose 2 days, not 3. So I don't know why the majority chose in classroom, but yet less days. So I'm really trying to even that out. And I understand you have to be clean, and that's it. So that is one suggestion that we do in the healthcare field, that when we are exposed to COVID patients, our safety, we wear face shields and face masks. So that's something that we teachers could consider as their concern being exposed. And my experience, I work at a hospital, so we are extremely, I don't know if people know, but our hospital is taking over COVID patients. And there's only 1% determined that contracted COVID. So considering that, our safety precautions that teachers could take, that could extremely limit that exposure, if that makes sense. So, and I will be on more concerns. Because my husband and I are both essential workers. We both have to work from the beginning of March. And same with other parents here. At that time of e-learning, I had my daughter on the days that I worked doing e-learning with my daughter in second grade, which is a parent. So I had another mother suggest that I had to make high school, if they're not on the same playing the same days, what's going to happen when my daughter's at home, not a 3rd grader. who's gonna do the learning. That's just, thank you.
Hello, my name is Mark Gonzalez, Stephanie from the business. I'm the construction worker. You guys talk about safety and everything else, just like my wife. I was working during this pandemic, doing social distancing and everything else. But just in reality, you can't do it. You have certain rules and everything else, but you still have to do your best. You still have to go there, eat, build, put together, take apart, close, hand-on-hand contact, and everything else. We did our masks, put our goggles on, face masks, whatever it is required us to do, we did the job on the maintain. So you guys are going about this, I think, the wrong way. You guys are acting like no one's ever going to get it here. You know, you're acting like students aren't going to get it. You're acting like teachers aren't going to get it. It's going to happen. Somebody is. My question is, if someone does get something, and they test positive, are you going to shut down the school? Are you guys going to quarantine that whole class from that area? I mean, this is something that you don't do that with fire departments. You do that with police departments. Definitely do with construction. Because I know on the construction site, people contracted. You know what they did? They just said that who wants to go home? Anyone who feels unsafe to go home? Anyone else who wants to keep working, keep working. That's reality. I'm on a construction site. I can die, not a cold, something falling, something like triple. So those are the risks I take in my life. So to sit here and say you don't want to do teaching or certain risk because of your health and everything else, my wife is in medical field. As she just explained, they wear their PPE. They wear PPE and apply it and do their job. That's it, plain and simple. I support full day. I support 2 feet. Because if you walk around, like everyone's saying here, is they're still in sports, they're doing all their other activities again, they're in the dugouts, they're playing in the neighborhoods. I understand everyone has their own idea of how to handle this, but I think you're doing more harm to students by doing the e-learning. I see the difference in my own children. Not saying that they're getting worse, but I see the difference in other children around, neighbors, friends. You can't have a bunch of kids running around with too much free time. By doing e-learning, it doesn't set up the structure, it doesn't set up that routine, it doesn't set up that discipline, that one-on-one type of thing with e-learning. You see more boys, I have friends that have tons of boys, they're playing more video games than anything else. If it's not for organized sports, they're on video games. They need that social, they need that group activities, they need that teacher to sit down with them and explain. They need that personal touch of the teacher. They need all that. So I noticed that Epstein said you need 3 options up there. You guys are only choosing 2. Why not give that option if you can't do that social distancing like they said required by Epstein? Put it out there. Full-time e-learning, full-time students during the day. See how many parents are going to agree. If the ones that agree to go daytime, full-time, then if it, 2/3 of them, see if you can accommodate 2/3 of the students. The other ones, let them stay home. The father over there mentioned about doesn't want this child. That's his choice. But I'm not giving my choice. My choice is full-time. That's right. I know it's good for the children. They need it. They have to have it. I can keep working. My wife keeps working. But it seems like everyone else who has that option to not have to be here chooses not to be here because of safety. Life still goes on, people. When you drive your car on the expressway, there's a chance you're going to get hit. You might not come home. I'm not going to live that way. I know you guys, everyone has their own opinion. But I think you're doing more harm to children by e-learning. And it's tough to have a kid to sit there, especially, anyone who has a kid that's, I would say, 7 and under, to sit in front of a computer for 5 hours. That's outrageous. Another question. Since we're getting cheated on the education, I guess, the length of time, what about vacation? What about the spring break? What about Christmas break? Are those going to be short to accommodate makeup time? Any of that's going to be accommodated or adjusted? Or summer break. Is there why even have a summer break? They've been on summer break for the longest time. 3 hours for people, they come home, they do it, they wake up, they do their 3 hours, and they're done. What do they do for the rest of the day? Now you're talking about 5 hours? That's not much. That's not You know, I wish I could work 5 hours every day. It's not possible. But you guys, I know you're in a difficult situation. You guys have to pay for your safety, but, you know, numbers do show that children are less susceptible. They're not carriers, they're just less susceptible. So I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to try that. And the thing is, how do you know if something were to happen and then go back to your mom, then go back to your hybrid? I don't understand why we started with the hybrids, because one case happens, you guys just go straight into it. Then you can try the full day. That's all I'm asking. Try the full day. Then if it doesn't work, then go to your hybrid. That's all. Thank you, guys.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Supernaut. I have 2 young children that attend here. One is going to be a 2nd grader, and one is going to be a 1st grader. And I think my purpose is just to articulate my experience briefly with the e-learning. I understand that this is a challenging time. I too am in the education field. We have day programs for young adults who have developmental disabilities. So we are going to have programs or required programs. So, but we're following the guidelines, which I do appreciate following guidelines. If you're an entity that is sanctioned by the government, I think it is your role or responsibility to uphold the safest methods, so actually as safe as possible. But getting back to the point, what I wanted to say is I understand the possibility of a hybrid model, and I'm not, you know, I'm accepting of this life that we're in right now. I'm going to go through it, but I do want to say that I'm very concerned about accessibility for young people and people with special needs. One of the comments that was stated in the PowerPoint presentation, as well as somewhere in the comments, is if you cannot wear a mask, then, you know, you could probably get a doctor's letter that allow you another alternative, but you wouldn't be able to qualify eligibility for in-person instruction. So my concerns are about that, if that is true, that I did that incorrectly. You're not.
No, I think you mixed 2 different comments.
Maybe I did, okay. So if you can't wear a mask, you still are eligible for being in school.
If you can't,
If you cannot wear a mask.
if you refuse to wear one, that's different.
Okay, because I do have concerns about the mask and wearing, and I'm practicing in my kids' will. So I'm concerned about that, but also the e-learning, I don't feel it's necessarily fully accessible. You know, like with my 6-year-old, he was doing fine, but the younger one, he just seeing himself on a screen was very difficult for him. It was in large groups, small groups, and then one-on-one. So I do have concerns if we put both learning in like an e-learning concept, I fear that my child is going to suffer. So that's just a general comment, and I'm sure other parents share that too. So, and then I also agree with the other parent about 2 consecutive days to provide consistency rather than splitting up the Monday and then you're doing a Tuesday, Thursday. I think it should be a 2 days on, then off 2 days. That's just my input. And then thank you very much for everything that you're doing. This is my need.
Would anybody else like to?
My name is Kelly Schmalzer. I just wanted to just echo some of what the gentleman earlier was saying. There's just the concerns about the need to standardize e-learning experience. And I know this has been talked about, so I just wanted to support that. But there is a need for that. The student experience is very great from teacher to teacher. And that's no fault of the teacher. No one was prepared for that. So just getting them the training that's a little bit great, as they should. But now we come back, how much time are they gonna have to really prepare for the e-learning experience? So that's just something I wanted to talk about and put it out there, and making sure that we're giving them the support that they need so that the students have that time, because it was not a great spring semester. And going forward, this is gonna be a little bit of a reality. What can we do? Thank you.
Anybody else in the comment? Are there any changes in the board to be able to discuss? Okay, next, closed session. Motion for closed session.
I mean, if you go into closed session for personnel.
Very. The secretary call the roll.
Arnold,
Yes.
Gary, Casper,
Yes.
Pearson, yes, Lloyd,
Yes.
Menzel, yes, Owen.
Yes. Thank you everybody for coming. We have a closed session.